Next, we'll take a look at an example for a scatter plot. We are told that we want to determine whether or not there's a relationship between the final exam scores for students in English 101 and the final exam scores for students in English 102. And we're given a data set that consists of 8 students and their grades in both English 101 and English 102. And so let's begin by drawing our scatter plot. Now recall that on the scatter plot, the variable along the x-axis is the independent variable. Remember that the independent variable is the one that you have the most control over. But in this case, both English 101 and English 102 could be considered the independent variable. Therefore, we'll just make an arbitrary choice and let the 101 grades be the x values and the 102 grades be the y values. And so I'm going to begin by drawing my x and y axes. And we need to determine an appropriate scale for both the x and y axis. So looking at my x values, I notice that the smallest value is 73 and that the largest value is 97. And so one way to mark off the scores might be to count by fives, starting at 70 and going to 100. And I'm going to put a label. I'm going to say that these are the English 101 scores. Now I'm going to do the same thing on the y values. I'm going to notice that the smallest y value is 72 and that the largest y value is again 97. And so I think a similar scale would work, starting at 70 and counting by fives until I get to 100. And again, I'm going to need a label for the y-axis, and so we'll just say English 102 scores. And so we'll plot our points. For each student, we'll look at their 101 and their 102 grade and plot a point to indicate that grade on the scatter plot. So student A had an 83 in English 101 and made a 78 in English 102. And so that point would be maybe right about here. Student B made a 97 and let me fix this right here. Okay, so student B made a 97 in English 101 and a 95 in 102, and so that point would be right about here. Student C made an 80 in 101 and an 83 in 102. Student 4 made a 95 in 101 and a 97 in 102. Student E made a 73 in 101 and a 78 in 102. Student F made a 78 in 101 and a 72. Student G made a 91 in 101 and a 90 in 102. And student H made an 86 in 101 and an 80 in 102. And so now we can see by looking at our scatter plot, if the question asks us what is the relationship between the 101 and the 102 scores, we can say that there is a linear relationship because the points do seem to move in a linear path. We can also say that that relationship is positive because the points start in the lower left-hand corner and move upwards towards the upper right-hand corner. So there's also a positive relationship between the two variables. And finally, you should write a concluding statement that actually relates the two specific variables that we are dealing with. And so remember that this statement typically will start with the x value increasing. And so we'll say as the grades in English 101 increase, and then we want to look at what happens to the grades in English 102. And so you can see by looking at your scatter plot that those grades are increasing as well. And so now we have our scatter plot drawn, and we've also interpreted that scatter plot to discuss the relationship that exists between the two variables.